What if I told you that Iran, yes, the modern-day nation of Iran, plays a critical role in the Bible's grand narrative of prophecy and world events? Often, when people think of the Bible, their minds are drawn to Israel, Egypt, and Babylon. But what if I told you that Iran, known as Persia in biblical times, was not just another empire? What if I told you that Persia was specifically named in prophecy to shape the destiny of God's chosen people? Iran's biblical origin story is far more fascinating than you may realize. From the lineage of Noah to the reign of Cyrus the Great, the history of the Iranians is deeply intertwined with some of the most pivotal moments in biblical history. But here's the truly shocking revelation. God used Persia, a nation of pagan kings, to deliver Israel, rebuild the temple, and fulfill prophecies that had been spoken centuries before they came to pass. In this video, we will explore how the Bible reveals the origin of the Iranian people, their rise to power, and their central role in shaping both the Old Testament and prophetic visions of the future. Buckle up, because what you're about to learn will change the way you view Iran, not just as a nation of the modern world, but as a key player in God's unfolding plan for the entire world. To understand Iran's biblical roots, we must first go back to the story of Noah and his descendants. After the Great Flood, Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of all the nations of the earth. This is described in the Table of Nations in Genesis 10. One of Japheth's sons was Madai, the progenitor of the Medes. The Medes would later become closely associated with the Persians, and together they would form the foundation of the Medo-Persian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in world history. Madai's descendants, the Medes, settled in the region that would become modern-day Iran. The Persians, emerging from the same geographical area, would rise to prominence later, but both groups shared a common Iranian ancestry. So, according to the Bible, the ancestors of the Iranians come from Japheth through Madai, which places the Iranian people in the biblical narrative from the very beginning of post-flood history. This connection links the Iranian people to one of the oldest genealogies in the Bible and sets the stage for their significant role in the history of God's people. Fast forward several centuries, and we find the rise of Persia, a kingdom that would play a crucial role in the biblical narrative. The Medes and Persians formed an alliance under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, who founded the Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire. At its height, the Persian Empire stretched from the Indus River to North Africa, encompassing many of the major regions mentioned in the Bible, including Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. But Persia's significance goes far beyond its military and territorial might. Its importance lies in the way God used it to fulfill his promises to the Israelites. The Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, had conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC, destroyed the temple, and taken the people of Judah into exile. The Israelites remained in Babylonian captivity for 70 years, as prophesied by the prophet Jeremiah. But then came Cyrus the Great, a Persian king who conquered Babylon in 539 BC, and with him, everything changed. The book of Ezra opens with a decree from Cyrus, allowing the Israelites to return to their land and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This event is recorded in Ezra 1:1-4, where Cyrus declares, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah." What's astonishing is this: Cyrus, a pagan king, was named over a century earlier by the prophet Isaiah as the one who would carry out God's will to restore Israel. Isaiah 44:28 and Isaiah 45:1 confirm this prophecy, and it remains one of the most remarkable moments in biblical history. Persia, a nation outside of God's covenant, became the instrument of God's redemption for his people. This was a profound turning point for Israel, highlighting Persia's central role in God's divine plan. One of the most remarkable elements of this prophecy is that it was given at a time when the Persian Empire was a mere shadow of its future power. God knew what was to come, and he named Cyrus long before the empire was even fully established. Through Persia, God not only restored the Jewish people to their homeland, but also ensured that his temple would be rebuilt, a crucial step in the unfolding of his promises. It's a testament to God's sovereign power and his ability to use even pagan nations to accomplish his purposes. The story of Cyrus and Persia's role in biblical prophecy is one of the most astonishing and awe-inspiring narratives in the Bible. It serves as a powerful reminder that God works in ways that we may not always understand, but his plans are always unfolding according to his perfect will. What does this mean for us today? It reminds us that God is sovereign over all nations and rulers, and he can use anyone to fulfill his divine purposes, no matter how unlikely or unexpected. Just as Persia played a critical role in God's plan for Israel, so too can nations today be part of his greater story. As we reflect on the legacy of Persia in the Bible, let us remember that God's ways are higher than ours, and his plans are always moving toward redemption and restoration. So, the next time you think of Iran, don't just think of a modern-day nation. Think of the ancient land of Persia, a place with deep biblical roots and a profound impact on the story of God's people. Persia was a key player in the past, and who knows, perhaps it will play a role in the future of God's kingdom as well. God's plan is unfolding, and Iran, just like every other nation, is part of that plan. In the end, it's not about political boundaries or earthly powers. It's about God's sovereignty over all the nations, guiding them toward his ultimate purpose, the restoration of all things. Thank you for watching. If this video has given you a new perspective on Iran's role in the Bible, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We've got more incredible insights and biblical stories to share with you. Let us know in the comments how this story has impacted your view of God's plan for the world and how he is using every nation in his grand narrative. Stay tuned for more content that explores the Bible's deepest mysteries, prophecies, and the extraordinary ways God works in our world. The legacy of Persia in the Bible is intricately tied to the role of Cyrus the Great. In Isaiah 44:28, God calls Cyrus by name more than 150 years before his birth, referring to him as his shepherd, who will fulfill God's divine purposes. This extraordinary prophecy highlights a key aspect of God's sovereign nature. He has the power to use anyone, even those outside of his covenant people, to accomplish his will. In Isaiah 45:1, Cyrus is even referred to as God's anointed, a title typically reserved for the kings of Israel. This raises a profound question. How could a foreign pagan king be called God's anointed? The answer lies in God's sovereignty and his ability to work through whomever he chooses to achieve his ultimate plans. Cyrus's decree to allow the Jews to return and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem was not merely a political maneuver. It was a prophetic fulfillment. The prophet Jeremiah had foretold that the Babylonian captivity would last for 70 years. Jeremiah 25:11 through 12, Jeremiah 29:10. And Cyrus's rise to power marked the end of that period. His actions made it possible for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem under the leadership of Zerubbabel. This was a key step in the restoration of Israel, showing that God had used Persia not only to defeat Babylon, the empire that had oppressed Israel, but also to facilitate Israel's rebirth as a nation. This was a powerful reminder that God's plan is far greater than any single empire, and that He can use even the most unlikely figures to accomplish His will. Persia's role in biblical history doesn't end with Cyrus and the rebuilding of the temple. The book of Esther provides another compelling example of how Persia was used by God to protect His people. During the reign of King Xerxes I, also known as Ahasuerus, a plot was devised by Haman, a high-ranking official in the Persian court, to exterminate the Jews living within the empire. Haman's deep hatred for the Jewish people led him to manipulate the king into issuing a decree that would allow for their annihilation. However, through God's providence, a young Jewish woman named Esther had become queen of Persia. Encouraged by her uncle Mordecai, Esther took a bold and dangerous step. She approached King Xerxes and revealed her Jewish identity, pleading for the survival of her people. In Esther 4:14, Mordecai speaks those powerful words, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther's intervention led to a dramatic reversal of the decree. Upon learning of Haman's plot, King Xerxes ordered Haman's execution and issued a new decree that allowed the Jews to defend themselves against their enemies. This story, recorded in the book of Esther, is celebrated annually during the Jewish festival of Purim as a reminder of how God used Persia, and particularly Queen Esther, to preserve the Jewish people. The story of Esther is a profound example of divine providence and protection. Once again, Persia, though a foreign empire, became an instrument through which God's people were preserved. God's hand was clearly evident throughout the story, using the Persian Empire as the backdrop for the miraculous deliverance of the Jews from annihilation. This illustrates how, even though Persia was not part of Israel's covenant people, it played a crucial role in the unfolding of God's plan. Persia was not a passive observer. It was an active participant in ensuring the survival of Israel, a nation destined to bring forth the Messiah. The Bible doesn't just speak of Persia's historical role. It also places Persia at the heart of prophetic visions concerning the future of world empires and God's ultimate plan for humanity. One of the most powerful examples of this is found in the book of Daniel. Daniel, a Jewish prophet who lived during the Babylonian exile, served in the courts of both the Babylonian and Persian empires. In the book of Daniel, we find several visions that reveal the rise and fall of empires, including Persia. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon dreams of a great statue made of various materials, each representing a world empire. The silver chest and arms of the statue symbolize the Medo-Persian Empire, which would succeed Babylon as the dominant power in the ancient world. Later, in Daniel 7, the prophet Daniel himself has a vision of 4 beasts representing 4 successive empires. The second beast, a bear raised up on one side, represents the Medo-Persian Empire, symbolizing the combined strength of the Medes and Persians. This empire would expand significantly, particularly under Cyrus, and would forever alter the course of history. Another significant vision involving Persia is found in Daniel 8, where the prophet sees a ram with 2 horns. One horn represents the Medes, and the other, the Persians, charging in all directions. This vision reveals the powerful and expansive nature of the Medo-Persian Empire, which would conquer and reshape the ancient world. Through these visions, God gave Daniel profound insight into the role of Persia in the broader context of his plan for the nations. In conclusion, Persia's involvement in biblical history is far-reaching and multifaceted. From the rise of Cyrus, whom God called his anointed, to the preservation of the Jewish people through Queen Esther, Persia played a crucial role in the unfolding of God's purposes. Even though Persia was a foreign empire, it was used by God as an instrument of his divine plan. This history serves as a powerful reminder of God's sovereignty, his ability to use anyone to fulfill his will, and the deep truth that his plan for humanity is far greater than any empire or nation. As we reflect on these stories, we are reminded that God is always at work, often in unexpected ways, to accomplish his purposes in the world. The prophetic visions that unfold in the Bible reveal much about God's grand design for the world. These visions not only address the vast empires that shaped history, but also hint at the future, giving us glimpses of how nations, even those we might consider unlikely, fit into God's eternal plan. One such vision includes the story of a goat with a prominent horn, symbolizing Greece and its king, Alexander the Great. Alexander would rise to conquer the mighty Persian Empire. This vision positions Persia at the center of God's prophetic timeline, highlighting how the empire's rise and fall were not random events, but part of a greater divine purpose. The shift from Persia's dominance to Greece's supremacy was no accident. In fact, Persia's time of influence was foretold, and its eventual fall paved the way for Greece's rise. But while Persia's empire was in power, God's people, Israel, were not forgotten. During Persia's reign, God's promises of deliverance and restoration to his people were fulfilled. These events were not just historical accidents, but were aligned with the prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. These prophets spoke of a time when Persia would rise to power, but also of the hope of restoration that would follow. This restoration would ultimately set the stage for the arrival of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Though Persia fell to Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, its influence did not simply disappear. By the time Jesus was born, the Persian Empire had already been replaced by the Greek and later the Roman empires. However, the legacy of Persia lived on, influencing governance, culture, and administration across the ancient world. Persia's remarkable system of administration, along with its cultural contributions, shaped the course of history for centuries to come. One of the more mysterious and fascinating connections between Persia and the New Testament is found in the story of the Magi. The wise men who visited the infant Jesus in Matthew 2 are believed by many scholars to have come from the region of Persia. These men, possibly Zoroastrian priests, were part of an ancient religious tradition in Persia that practiced astrology and interpreted omens. The journey of the Magi to worship the newborn king of the Jews is a reminder of Persia's enduring connection to the biblical narrative, even after the fall of its empire. Despite the empire's decline, the wisdom and traditions of Persia continued to have an impact on the ancient Near East. Persian scholars were among the first to recognize the significance of the star that heralded Jesus' birth, a remarkable example of Persia's lasting influence on the world. In addition, Persia's policy of religious tolerance played a significant role in shaping the religious landscape of the ancient world. The Persian Empire was known for allowing its subjects to maintain their religious practices. This policy of tolerance would later influence the Roman Empire, which adopted a similar stance toward religious freedom. This environment of religious liberty allowed Jewish communities to flourish throughout the Persian Empire, which set the stage for the eventual spread of Judaism and later Christianity across the ancient world. As we reflect on the role of Persia in the Bible, it's essential to also consider Iran's future in light of biblical prophecy. Many scholars and theologians believe that Iran, the modern-day nation that corresponds to ancient Persia, will play a key role in the events of the end times. One of the most significant prophecies involving Persia is found in Ezekiel 38 to 39. In these chapters, the prophet Ezekiel describes a coalition of nations that will come against Israel in the last days. Among these nations is Persia, which will join forces with Gog of Magog and other nations to fight a final battle, known as the War of Gog and Magog. This prophecy, often interpreted as a future event, paints a picture of a final confrontation between the forces of evil and God's people, with Israel at the center of the conflict. While the exact nature and timing of this war are subjects of much debate, the inclusion of Persia, modern-day Iran, in this prophecy suggests that Iran's role in the region will continue to have significant spiritual and political implications in the days to come. Furthermore, the prophecies of Daniel, Isaiah, and Ezekiel all speak to the rise and fall of empires, including Persia, and highlight a broader theme of God's sovereignty over the nations. Persia's role in biblical prophecy reminds us that no empire, no matter how powerful, is beyond God's control. God raises up nations, and He also brings them down, all according to His divine plan. The story of Persia serves as a powerful reminder that history is not merely the tale of the rise and fall of empires, but the unfolding of God's grand purpose for the world. As we witness modern events in the Middle East, including tensions between Iran and Israel, it's crucial to remember that these events are part of a much larger story. This story began in the pages of the Bible and will culminate in the fulfillment of God's promises. The story of Persia and its modern counterpart, Iran, reminds us of how God can use even the most unlikely nations to fulfill His divine purposes. From the descendants of Japheth through the rise of Cyrus the Great, Persia played a pivotal role in biblical history. From the restoration of Israel to the protection of the Jewish people in the Book of Esther, Persia's impact on God's people cannot be understated. But Persia's significance doesn't end with its historical role. The prophecies of Daniel, Isaiah, and Ezekiel remind us that Persia was not just a part of God's plan for the past, but continues to be a part of His plan for the future. Iran's place in biblical prophecy points to its ongoing role in the unfolding events leading up to the end times. As we consider the modern world, particularly the tensions between Iran and Israel, we must approach these events with a biblical perspective. God's sovereignty over the nations means that every kingdom, every empire, and every leader is part of His plan. The story of Persia is a testament to God's power and control over the nations of the earth. It reminds us that God can use even foreign powers to fulfill His promises and bring about His ultimate plan for salvation. Persia, now Iran, continues to play a profound role in the world stage, and its connection to the Bible reminds us that history is more than just the rise and fall of empires. It is the unfolding of God's divine plan for the redemption of His people and the world.